everyone, welcome to our Give Thanks cookie decorating kit. My name's Denise and I'm the owner of D is for Delicious, and I'm so excited to decorate cookies with you today. So in this set we're going to be doing a lot of turkeys and a lot of Thanksgiving themed cookies, and why don't we get started? First things first, let's get some supplies out that we're going to use. You're just going to need a few things that you have around your house. You're going to need a pair of scissors. Please grab some toothpicks. That will be helpful for moving the icing around on our cookies. And some napkins or paper towels. And have something to work on. Either a cookie tray would work out just fine, or a table covering of some sort. I have parchment paper here. Something to cover up your surface so that when you're done, you can just throw it away and you won't have a lot of cleanup to do. So in your box, why don't we open up our cookie kit, see what we have in there. And why don't we take out our supplies. Please don't start trimming the bags quite yet. I know it looks so exciting, all these colors, but we're gonna get into that really soon. But let's just set our colors aside. And we have our cookies too. We'll set those aside. And there's a container of sprinkles. That's gonna be fun. We're gonna use that in a little while. You'll also find 2 piping bags for rebagging our icing a little bit later. We'll be using those a little bit later, so set those aside. And what I'd like you to take out very first thing is this practice sheet. So before we start on cookies, I think it's a great idea to just practice and get into the motion of how the icing behaves, how to hold the piping bag, and this will give you good practice before you jump into decorating your cookies. So with the practice sheet, I suggest you choose one of the colors, maybe not the white because it won't show up as well. And with that, I would like you to trim off a little bit of the bag. So start by trimming just a bit. It's easier to trim more, and if you trim too much, the icing will come out too fast and you won't be as successful. So just trim off a little bit, and let's see if you've trimmed it enough to cover up the lines here. So I'm going to hold the piping bag with my right hand. That's my dominant hand, the hand I write with. So I'm gonna squeeze at the top, and with my left hand, just guide it along. So I'm squeezing as I go. And let me just tell you a little tip about stopping the stream of icing. So to stop, you press down and pull up. It happens in one fluid motion. Press down and pull up to make the icing stop. You really have to tell it when to stop, otherwise it will just keep dragging on. So straight lines are a good place to start. Gives you the feel for how the icing flows. If you're having to squeeze too hard to have the icing come out, that might be a good sign to trim just a little bit more off. All right, let's move on to some movement now. So on these lines, we are going to be moving the icing up and around in this circle. Notice that the tip of my bag is not touching the surface of the paper. It's hovering just a little bit above it, and it's just guiding the icing along. The icing is actually following the piping bag, which I'm moving with my hand. So that's why we're practicing first. It definitely requires a little bit of practice. And maybe this is your first time. Welcome, beginners. It's so great to have you. And if you've done this before, welcome back. I'm so happy that you decided to do another decorating kit. I hope that you find them relaxing and fun, therapeutic. That's what got me interested in decorating cookies. I really just stumbled upon it. I had been into scrapbooking a lot at that time in my life, and I found it so exciting that you could take a blank canvas and turn it into something else. So that's what got me hooked on decorating cookies, and then I found it to be so relaxing and fun. Unlike circles, maybe you didn't find that relaxing and fun. Circles can be one of the trickiest shapes to do, so don't worry if that one was a little challenging. Circles are challenging for me too. So let's wrap it up with some hearts. All right, you guys, are you warmed up? I know I am. I am ready to dive into the cookies here. So why don't we trim our bags, get all of these cookies out of the bags, set these in front of us so we can have some fun. Right now, you are starting with a completely blank cookie, and in no time, you are not even gonna believe the works of art that you're going to create. I can't wait for you to see how just using a few techniques can turn these blank cookies into beautiful creations. All right, so I don't know if you've seen the picture yet to know what you're doing, but let's see if you can identify what the cookies are going to be. So I think you probably can spot right away the flower. We're actually going to use this to do a turkey on it, and we're going to make all of those areas on the outside become its feathers. We've actually got 3 different turkey bodies in here. They're going to just all look a little different. We've got a side angle of a turkey, and this one actually is going to be a turkey as well. So the way you can tell it's upright is this little tuft of hair at the top, and then there's some little feathers off to the side. This one is going to be a drumstick, so like a turkey leg. We've got a big pumpkin. This one will give you some room to write if you're feeling daring. And then there's a pumpkin pie slice, of course. So what I would like for you to do is, let me just think this through real quick. I'm gonna move the turkeys closest to me. And I'm gonna have those other shapes up on top. I'm gonna just start with these first. All right, and we're gonna trim our bags. So before we get started, let's get the rest of our bags trimmed. I trimmed my red one to start. Let's trim the others so that they're ready and waiting for us to use them. Remember, it's always easier to trim more. I always trim my bag off to the side. That way that little speck of piping bag doesn't fall on top of the cookies. A little bit. All right, so we are prepared. We've got our icing handy. We've got everything we need. We're gonna be using brown and orange quite a bit. So that's why you'll notice you have more of those colors. And why don't we get started? So on the turkey body, the one that's facing, like looking off in the other direction, we are going to divide the next few steps of what we do today into 3 steps. And we're about to begin the very first step, which is called outlining. After the outlining phase, we move into flooding. And then after flooding, we move into detailing. So in the outlining phase, we are just planning ahead for our cookies. We are going to make our sections, our areas. We're going to give them a border or an outline, and that will allow us to be able to flood the cookies, put the icing inside, and it creates a nice barrier. So with the turkey here, I'm going to follow along the outline of this cookie. I'm gonna leave one tiny area alone, and that's its beak. If you already have put brown there because you were so excited to start, please don't worry. But I'm just gonna leave that area alone so that I can turn his beak later. And I'm going as close to the edge of the cookie as I can without going over. And I'm just tracing along the cookie. I know his feathers, his body has some scalloped areas here. So I'm just going right along. I chose to use the brown. If you chose another color, that's totally fine. I just chose his background as that dark brown. All right, and that's all I'm gonna do to him right now. I'm gonna leave him alone and move on to the next one. So in this next cookie here, he's gonna become a turkey that he's like facing forward, and we see his beautiful belly and his feathers. So I'm first gonna make his belly area, and I'm gonna do that in red. I'm gonna make a little bit of an oval shape for his tummy. Mine looks more like an Easter egg, but that's fine. Just some sort of like oval Easter egg shape for his midsection. And then we're going to do the bottom area in some different colors to represent his feathers. So I'm going to do an orange feather on both sides. And then below that, I'm going to do a yellow feather. Okay, so there's this colorful feather and belly, and then we're going to do his body, which I'm going to use for the brown again. And I'm just outlining that portion as close to the edge as I can get. And that's as far as I'm going to go on that design. Let's move on to the flower, which is going to become another turkey. So on this one, I'm going to hold it so that the petal of the flower is facing directly down, because that's going to be his body. And I'm going to use the front of his turkey self. I'm going to make that piece like the dark brown, and I'm going to do the back of his feathers in more of a lighter brown. So the way that I describe this shape is almost like a peanut. Kind of rounded at the top and rounded at the bottom, and it tapers in a little bit. It almost looks like the number 8. So I'm going to create that area for his head, and then I'm going to make the background this lighter, this like creamy color, just so there's not so much brown on all our cookies. You can choose any colors you'd like though. If you'd like to do a different color combination than what I'm doing, please go for it. There's no right or wrong way to do cookies. So I just outlined it with that cream, and that's as far as I'm gonna go with that stuff right now. So I'm going to shuffle my cookies around a little bit. The reason I do this is so that I'm not reaching across the cookies. You don't have really good control if you're moving away from your body too much. I feel that I have better control when I use piping bags closest to my body. So I encourage you to do the same. All right. And with the pumpkin pie, I am going to actually trim my bag just a little more. I noticed it's not coming out as wide as I wanted. There we go. I'm going to make some crust first. I'm going to make an area for crust. So your crust can be as thick or thin as you'd like. I'm making it, I don't know, maybe that's like 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to do the rest of this cookie in the pumpkin color. I've seen some people that actually turn their pie slice into other flavors of pie, like cherry pie. You can really have some fun. Play around with it. And that's as far as I'm going to go with the pumpkin pie. On the drumstick, the 2 colors I'm going to use are the brown and the white. So for this one, the only part that you're not following the shape of the cookie on is the portion where the bone meets the meat. So I'm just tracing along this top portion first. And when I get to this area, I'm just kind of waving it along a little bit. There's no real straight edge there. So just like a ripply effect. And then that bottom portion, I'm going to outline in white. All right, that's it for the drumstick outlining. And now for the pumpkin, I'm going to do my pumpkin just big and orange. And I'm going to follow along the edge of the cookie. I like how wide this pumpkin is. It's a nice big background that we can write on later. I'll make a little stem area. There we go. So do you see how we've taken every cookie and we've planned ahead for what we're going to put on the cookie. So we've outlined it, we've made sections. That helps us now in this next step, which is flooding, so that we know what to do in each area. So let's move on to flooding. Let's move our cookies back. Remember, it's best to have them closest to you. And I'm going back to the original set that I started with, the ones I just outlined first. And I'm gonna have those close to me. I also want to have my toothpicks close to me because we are going to do some marbling with some of the icing to give the feather look. And it really is fun to use toothpicks when you're decorating cookies. It's helpful for a few reasons, which I'll show you in a moment. And any of your bags, so when you were outlining, did any of your bags seem a little bit on the fine tip side? Because if they did, we're gonna trim them just a little bit more right now. Not so the icing pours out, but we want it to come out just a little bit faster than it did before. So I'm not trimming a lot off. I'm just trimming a little bit more, especially on my brown and on my orange, because those are the two colors that we have some large surfaces to flood. Alrighty, so let's get started here. On the turkey, I'm gonna start over here with the one I started with. And when I flood, I'm just squeezing a lot of icing out. I move my hand in a circular motion. It helps to blend the icing together. And what I'm going for is a solid background that is going to dry nice and smooth, almost like a sheet of glass. So I'm going to put quite a bit of icing on. And then I'm going to take a toothpick and just kind of push it up to the edge. I want to make sure that I don't see any of my cookie peeking out. I'm moving rather quickly because I don't want my icing to start to dry until I'm all done with my decorating. All right, so I have the base of my turkey all flooded. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some colors to the background so that I can do some marbling and create the feathers. So what I'm going to do are some just arches here. It really doesn't matter what shape or size or color combination you do these. I just want to add some of these brighter colors back here. I think even the white would look pretty. So I'm just making these curved lines, and then I'm going to take my toothpick, and while the icing is wet, we have to do this all while it's wet. I'm going to start on the outside and drag my toothpick in. So I'm just dragging it in. And do you notice how it's just curving the lines just a little bit and it gives it a rippled effect? So to me, that looks a little bit like the feathers and the layered look on a turkey. And I love it. So I'm gonna stop right there, and it will actually just start to dry as one solid surface in the background when you stop touching it. So with that feather, that marbling, that technique, you can only do that on the icing when it's wet. So keep that in mind. If you try to experiment with any of the other cookies, that's totally fine. Just always do it while the icing is wet. That's the only way it will work. All right, we're gonna move on to the next step here. This turkey, I'm gonna fill his head in, brown. You really have to put a lot of icing on there, don't you? And speaking of a lot of icing, if you ever happen to put maybe a little too much icing on, the reason you'll know it's too much icing is it might start to spill over the edge of the cookie. If that happens, don't worry. It does happen to us sometimes when we have a little too much icing on. And the best way to combat that is just to let it go. It's gonna drip off the side, but if you just leave it alone and let it just do its thing and let gravity take over, you'll be able to scrape it off after it's crusted over a little bit. So I encourage you to just let it do its thing and you can scrape it off after it's done crusting a bit. So I just flooded the head of the turkey, and now I'm going to just flood his belly. So I'm just flooding this red. If you want to try marbling in this, you certainly can. I know turkeys don't really have polka dots, but I'm going to add a few polka dots to this belly. I just want to show you how fun it can be to put wet icing on wet icing again when you're doing polka dots. So remember when we were on our practice sheet and we started and stopped a line by pressing down and pulling up? That's the motion that I'd like you to do for polka dots. You squeeze just a bit and then stop and pull up at the same time. So squeeze just a little bit and pull up. And that's how to make a nice clean polka dot. I'm just going to give some polka dots on his belly. I don't know why, I just think it might be cute. And since they're my cookies I'm working on, I can just do whatever. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Just play. If you get a thought, I say go for it. So I did some polka dots, and now I'm also going to fill in that feather that's yellow on both sides of his body. And I'm going to fill in the orange feather. There we go. Can you believe just a few moments ago you had blank cookies? Look what you're doing now. They're becoming little things. I think it's so fun. All right, so for this turkey, we're going to give it that same effect that we did on the first turkey with marbling. We're going to create a feathered backdrop on this guy too. So let's begin by flooding all those petals of the flower, or turkey in this case. So I'm just putting a lot of icing on here. And I just mix it together with the tip of my bag as I go. And after I've done the bulk of the flooding, I always like to switch over to a toothpick. I feel like I have better control with the toothpick. And that's when I just push it right up to the edge. Push it up to every spot. Push it up to the middle. And you just have to move the icing very gently with the toothpick. Just a little tug and it gets the icing moving. This color is so close to the color of the cookie that I really have to peek around the cookie here. When I look up at the top, I want to make sure there's no gaps. All right, I think I got it all. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some colors so I can make a nice colorful turkey in the back. And I'm going to start really near the edge of each of these petals. Imagine if I could make one solid motion. That's kind of the angle of each of these lines I'm doing. And then we'll go with orange, kind of like a rainbow. We'll move on to yellow. And how about, I think I'll go back to red again. I think what I'll do is I'm going to do one band of red. It's like a big rainbow. I think we can even fit one more in here. I have a hard time stopping. So I'm going to keep going. There we go. I think I'm officially out of room. So now that the marbling portion is all laid down, all those lines are there, I'm going to drag my toothpick through and I'm going to drag in for this. So I'm just pulling the icing to his body, to his head. I think it's so neat how just the simple motion can give such a cool effect. Now that is one colorful turkey. All right. So I did that, and now let me give him his body in the front. This will become his face, and we can put some little feet on him. All right. And when I'm done playing with that, it's going to start to settle down. So let's shuffle our cookies around. Let's get those uniced cookies closer to us. I suggest you pick up those uniced cookies and just with one finger gently move the finished cookie above. Well, almost finished. They still need some details, but they're flooded. You've outlined and flooded them. Way to go. All right, so pumpkin pie, turkey leg, and pumpkin. So let's fill in those sections. Flood those cookies. There's nothing special with the pumpkin pie slice. I'm just going to fill in both of those areas. And there are some fun details we'll put on in the detailing stage, but not right now. Right now, we're just going to flood them. And the crust. I'm just thinking about Thanksgiving dinner right now. I'm just thinking about the stuffing that my grandma used to make. That was always my favorite part of Thanksgiving. No one really has mastered her stuffing since then. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but every year I keep thinking I should really try to do it. I don't consider myself a very good cook, but I've been craving her stuffing. I think that means something. I wish I could hear your voices right now. I'd ask you what your favorite Thanksgiving food is. We always like to have a good conversation about that at cookie classes. So I hope that you're looking forward to a special food too. This is a big cookie, isn't it? There's so much brown on this one. This is like a real big drumstick. All right, so I am gonna get my toothpick handy and move that icing. You really have to get a good look around the cookie. Make sure you look at it from all angles. That's my noisy fridge. I don't know if you can hear that. It's so noisy. All right, and now for the bone part. I wipe off the toothpick a lot. That way I don't transfer the different colors to the spots where it doesn't belong. I don't want the bone to have a lot of brown streaks in it, so that's why I wipe it off really well. Having a few toothpicks handy is always helpful. There we go with the turkey leg. All right, friends, here we go with the pumpkin. So with the pumpkin, this is a nice big surface. This would be a great opportunity where you can try one of the marbling techniques you learned, like polka dots or the lines that you drag. I think I'm going to show you the marbling technique with the lines again, and this time I'm going to alternate the direction that I drag the icing. I always think that looks fun. So I'm going to flood that cookie, cover it all up. Push that icing right up to the edge. And I think I'm going to use white. I'm going to use white in the background. And I'm going to make a few different horizontal lines. So I'm just going to go straight across. 1, 2, I'm going to make 4 lines. Okay, and with those lines in the background, now that they're wet, I'm going to start off to one side and I'm going to press down my toothpick and drag the lines down, move over a little bit and then drag it up, move over a little bit and drag it down, and repeat that pattern. So here's another way that you can give a pattern in the background. Isn't that pretty? I just love that. And I'm going to fill in a little stem here too. There we go. All right, so congratulations, you just finished step 2. You just finished flooding all your cookies. Ideally, it would be amazing if you could step away from the cookies right now, take a little break, go get a snack, do a little something, and give these about 5 to 10 minutes would be awesome if you could let them just hang out and crust over a little bit. So I'll see you back here in 5 to 10 minutes. All right, so we gave our cookies some drying time. Do you notice that they kind of have a little bit of a matte finish to them? They're not as glossy as they were. They're just kind of crusted over a little bit, I can see. So that means we're ready to add some detail and it'll actually stay on top. If you detail too soon, you have the tendency of having that icing sink down into your icing. So before we detail, we need to rebag some of our icing because we just got done cutting some of our bags on the bigger side, and I just want to transfer some icing into new bags so I can start small again. I'm going to do that to my orange because there are just some details on there that I'm going to do with like the beak. So I want to transfer over my orange, and I think it would also be really helpful to transfer over the red. So if you have a rubber band or something handy, you can do that. I actually always use a bag sealer on mine, and I don't have that handy right now. So I am going to just kind of roll it around while I work. But I'd encourage you to get like a twisty tie or a rubber band or something. I'm also going to do the red. So I trimmed off a lot of the old bag. I put it into the new bag, and now I'm just pulling it out. And that way I have a nice fine tip to work with. The other colors, we won't have to use a whole lot. We're going to use our sprinkles, and you'll notice in your sprinkle container there's a lot of eyeball options. So you might want to just set out the eyeballs, and you'll see that there are 3 different pairs of eyeballs to use. You can use them, you don't have to use them. It's really up to you. Also in your sprinkle mix, you're going to notice there's some black balls that will be like eyeballs too. So you kind of have your pick on what you'd like to do in terms of the eyes for the different turkeys. And then the rest of the sprinkle mix is just for fun, to just put it wherever you like. I would recommend putting it on the whipped cream because we're going to add a big area to that. But if you want to add more icing to a cookie and add sprinkles, you can have some fun. Sprinkles work best when you add it to wet icing. So if you are going to add more sprinkles to anything different than what I do, just add icing and then sprinkle on some sprinkles. All right, so let's do the pumpkin pie first, and we're going to add sprinkles to that one. So what I'm going to do is make a dollop of whipped cream. And I thought that would be a fun spot for some sprinkles. There we go, nice and colorful. And then on the crust of the pumpkin pie, This is where we're gonna give it a little bit of a textured look. You know how a pie crust looks like it's been pinched? Just go back and forth. This resembles one of the lines you practiced on your practice sheet, the roller coaster one. And there we have our pumpkin pie slice. So that one is all detailed and finished. The turkey leg. There are so many things you can do to this one. You can just leave it alone. You could try writing on it. I'm gonna give it a face and I'm gonna add some eyeballs. And I love on some of these candy eyeballs, if you place them in a certain way, the pupils can be looking in different directions. So I'm going to put just a little bit of icing on the back. I'm gonna actually put a little brown on the back. That way, if it peeks out at all, it will be the same color as the background. So I'm just putting a tiny bit on the back, which is hard because I trimmed my brown so big. There we go. And then I'm gonna add a beak, and I'm gonna do that with the orange. You could use any color for the beak. I think the yellow would be fun too. I'm gonna trim just a little bit off this new orange bag that I made. That way I have a fine tip, more control. I'm gonna make a triangle. And I just keep applying the icing until I'm happy with the shape. There we go. And on that triangle, I'm gonna add the little red gobbler. I think that's what it's called. And I'm gonna just droop it off to the side. Give it like a teardrop at the end. Fill that in. Maybe I'll make a little bit more. There we go. And there we have that drumstick. That is so funny. This is a new cookie cutter that I got this year, and I think it is so funny. All right, so time for the pumpkin. Now, if you would like to write something on it, here's what I recommend you do. I think it would be best to practice writing on the paper beside you first. Practice writing a few times. That way you can just get a feel for how the icing works when you're doing letters. It's not something we've done to this point. I'm trimming just a tiny bit more on my red so it comes out. I am going to write, give thanks. So when you're doing your letters, it's very important you do that press down and pull up motion so you can have your lines start and stop. All right, and then I think it also looks fun to do cursive on cookies. You can see which one you feel most comfortable with. The nice thing about cursive is that you don't pick up your bag, so it just keeps on flowing. All right, so after practicing those two, how do you feel about it? Choose what you'd like to write. Maybe write the word hello. Gobble is very fun to do too. If you don't want to commit to doing too many letters, gobble is a great option that would be very fitting for this set. I always think it's best to write it off to the side. That way you just are a little bit more confident and comfortable in what you'd like to say. Maybe your name. Here's the thing, even if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you want it to, it's gonna taste really great, and I think you're gonna still be really proud of yourself for attempting it. So I say go for it. I'm gonna write the word gobble because I think it's very fitting with all these turkeys on this set. So I start off pretty close to the one edge because there's nothing more frustrating than running out of room when you're writing on a cookie. You can always adjust your spacing as you go and spread out your letters just a little bit. when you see you're gonna have a lot of room. Like I see, oh yeah, I've got plenty of room. So now I can just space them out a little bit more. But when I don't start over too far enough, then I have to squeeze them in too much. So there we have gobble. I can't wait to see what you guys did. I hope you'll send me a picture. All right, so we're done with these front three. Why don't we shuffle them around so we have good control over these last three. Move them aside as carefully as you can. Those words on the paper are wet, so I'm going to shuffle them carefully. All right, so for these front three, let's add some details. Now on the little turkey that's looking off to the side, we can choose any of these eyeball options. I'm gonna go for this big black one. I don't know. At first I thought I wanted to, and now I think I want him to go on this one. I think I'm gonna choose just one of these eyeballs. And I'm gonna put a little bit on the back to make it like kind of like glue, make it stick. So if your icing has a lot on the tip of it, it's good to wipe it on a paper towel. That way you have good control. All right, so I'm gonna eyeball it where I'm gonna go and drop it. There we go. And I think I'm gonna just press it down a little bit with my toothpick. And off on the edge there, I can add his beak. You can add it in yellow or orange. I'm just gonna make a little triangle going off the side. And on his neck area, there's that one little spot, we can add that little gobbler. I think it really could be called a waddle. Every year I forget, and every year I find out, and then I forget again before the next Thanksgiving. All right, I think that's as much as I'm gonna do to this cookie. I think it's so fun, I love it. All right, this little one, I'm gonna add some of these eyeballs as well. Use your icing glue. Kind of just make a game plan where it's gonna go. Drop it down. A little bit. Let's give them the nose. Add a gobbler waddle thing. If any of you guys know what it's called, I'd love for you to tell me when you send the picture. There we go. Oh, I love him. I think it's so cute. I think I'm gonna put a little, I wanna put a little heart on his belly. I don't know why. I just think a little heart off to the side would be a fun finishing touch. There we go. There he is. I get sad at this point in a class that I'm teaching when it's almost done. Do you get sad at home when it's almost done? I mean, you have to look forward to eating them now, so that's good. All right, so the last one, this is where I was gonna use the other eyeballs. They're both very dark, but it's just another look we could do. I wanted to give you some options. They're so hard to handle in adult hands. I wonder if you have littler hands if this is easier. You know, I've watched different cookie videos where different cookie artists use tweezers for this part. I can see why that would be a helpful technique. So there's some eyes, and now let's add a little beak. And of course the waddle. You know, I think on the bottom, I'm gonna add some little feet. I'm just gonna add some little feet. Here's what you can do. Let me practice off to the side. I forget if they go up like this or down. I think, yep. See, I haven't made a turkey cookie yet like this year. I forget from year to year. I make 2 upside down V's, like that. And I'm gonna try to add one little line in the middle. Like his little feet, his little toes. And there you have it. There's your turkey. There's your give thanks set. You guys did it. I hope you love them. I hope you're proud of yourself. You're gonna notice something really fascinating. When you move your cookies away from this messy surface that you're working on, and when they go into your box, it's kind of like they even look more beautiful when you put them into the box, because all the crust and all the mess is gone. And when you put them into the box, they can actually hang out here for the night. In fact, that's where I'd suggest you put them. Don't stack them on top of each other because they're really wet. They need to sit in this box and hang out all night long so that they can dry. If you want to taste one tonight, which I'm sure you probably do, you definitely can. I think they taste better the next day. That's just my preference, but you'll have to test it out yourself and see what you think. So you can set them in this box, and if you're not going to eat them within the next 3 days, you definitely can freeze them after they dry overnight. Put them in a container with a lid so you can pop it in the freezer. And if you have to stack the cookies at all, make sure you put parchment paper or wax paper between the layers so they don't ruin all your detail work. But thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I know that there's so many crazy things going on in the world right now, but I hope that you had some time to just escape all of that, spend time with family and friends, and just relax a little bit. We'll have Christmas sets and winter sets coming up next month, so I hope that you'll keep following and decorating cookies with us. Thanks for joining me today, guys. Bye.